The gavel hadn't even banged yet, but the smirk on my mother's face told me the verdict was already written in her mind. She was the queen, and I was the peasant squatting in her castle. She thought she had successfully stolen my grandmother's legacy with a smile and a lie, but she forgot that in Florida, the most dangerous things are often buried just beneath the sand. The air conditioning in the Pinellas County Courthouse was wheezing, a mechanical death rattle that did absolutely nothing to combat the stifling, wet heat of a Florida mid-morning. I could feel a bead of sweat tracing a slow, agonizing line down the center of my back, soaking into the fabric of my thrift store blazer. It was a chaotic blend of polyester and regret that I'd bought for $4 at a Goodwill specifically for this day, hoping it made me look like a responsible adult and not a 26-year-old drowning in student debt and grief. Across the aisle, seated at the plaintiff's table, my mother, Patricia, looked entirely immune to the temperature. She was cool as a cucumber, draped in a white linen suit that probably cost more than my entire year of tuition. I knew exactly how she paid for it, too. She had definitely charged it to my dead grandmother's credit card before the bank could freeze the accounts. That was Patricia's superpower, spending money that didn't belong to her and looking fabulous while doing it. She popped her gum loudly, snap, crack, and shot me that look. It was a specific expression I had known since childhood, the one she reserved for when she had cornered me. It was a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. Hidden behind oversized designer sunglasses, she refused to take off indoors. It said, "I always win, Jordan. Why do you even try?" I gripped the edge of the defense table so hard my knuckles turned the color of ash. My stomach churned with a familiar toxic cocktail of grief and panic. I had spent the last 5 years of my life as Nana's unpaid hospice nurse, wiping brows, changing sheets, and managing medications, while Patricia was finding herself in Vegas. Or was it Cabo? It didn't matter. She was gone. But now that Nana was in the ground, Patricia was back, and she wasn't here to mourn. She was here to feast. Presiding over this circus was Judge Sterling, a stern-looking man with silver hair and a face carved out of granite. He sat high on his bench, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he stared down at the mountain of motions Patricia's sleazy strip mall lawyer had filed. To an outsider, this was just paperwork. To me, it was an eviction notice from my own life. They were trying to seize everything. Specifically the 3 properties that made up Nana's entire estate. First, there was the run-down bungalow in Tampa where I was currently living, or rather, squatting, according to my mother's filings. It was a modest house with peeling yellow paint and a mango tree in the back that dropped fruit like bombs on the tin roof, but it was the only home I had known for half a decade. Then there was the lucrative Airbnb property near Orlando, a pristine condo that brought in steady rental income, money Patricia was desperate to get her manicured claws on. Finally, there was the Forgotten Shack, a desolate piece of property up in the Panhandle that Nana had barely mentioned, sitting on a plot of land that was mostly swamp and sawgrass. If Patricia won today, I wasn't just going to be homeless. Nana's entire legacy, the stability she had worked 50 years as a nurse to build, would be liquidated and shoved up Patricia's nose or thrown onto a blackjack table within a month. Your Honor, Patricia's lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson who smelled intensely of cheap cologne and desperation, stood up. He smoothed his tie, shooting a pitying glance in my direction. We are asking for an immediate summary judgment. The defendant, Ms. Jordan Banks, has no legal claim to these properties. She is, for all intents and purposes, a squatter who took advantage of an elderly woman's declining mental state. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, burning hotter than the humid air in the room. A squatter? I was the one who held Nana's hand when she forgot who she was. I was the one who learned how to crush pills into applesauce because she couldn't swallow. I was the one who sang her old hymns at 3 a.m. when the pain was too bad for her to sleep. My lawyer, Elena, placed a calming hand on my arm. Elena was a public aid attorney, overworked and underpaid, with dark circles under her eyes that matched mine. She didn't have a linen suit or a fancy briefcase. She had a stack of manila folders and a righteous anger that simmered quietly. "Easy, Jordan," she whispered. "Let him talk. He's digging a hole." "But he's lying," I hissed back, my voice trembling. "He's making it sound like I preyed on her." "We know the truth," Elena said firmly, "and soon the judge will, too." I wasn't so sure. The legal system felt like a massive, grinding machine designed to crush people like me. People who didn't have the money to fight. People who tried to do the right thing while the villains of the world hired guys like Henderson to rewrite history. Judge Sterling flipped a page of the motion, the sound echoing in the silent courtroom. He sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 petty family disputes. He looked up, his gaze drifting from Henderson to Patricia, and finally landing on me. "Mr. Henderson," the judge said, his voice deep and resonant, "you are asserting that the decedent's previous will, the one filed with the county 5 years ago naming Miss Banks as the sole beneficiary, is invalid due to a more recent document?" "That is correct, Your Honor," Henderson said, puffing out his chest. "We have submitted into evidence a handwritten will dated just 1 week prior to the late Mrs. Banks's passing. It clearly revokes all previous testaments and leaves the entirety of the estate to her only daughter, Patricia." I squeezed my eyes shut, flashing back to the moment I first saw that will. It was scribbled on the back of a greasy Denny's placemat, a literal placemat. The handwriting was shaky, yes, but it wasn't Nana's shaky. Nana had severe arthritis. Her hands were locked like claws in her final months. She hadn't held a pen in 2 years. I had to sign her checks for her. The idea that she sat down at a Denny's, a place she hated, by the way, and wrote out a new will, leaving everything to the daughter who abandoned her, was so laughable it should have been criminal. But here we were. Patricia had managed to get an injunction based on that scrap of paper. She had weaponized the legal system's slowness. While the court debated the validity of the placemat, she had successfully frozen the assets. "And," Henderson continued, pacing in front of the bench, "we have witness affidavits stating that the daughter, Ms. Jordan Banks, isolated her grandmother. She kept Patricia away. She poisoned the mother-daughter bond to secure her financial future. It is a classic case of elder abuse, Your Honor." Patricia let out a soft, theatrical sniffle from the table. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue she had pulled from her designer purse. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award, or at least a daytime Emmy. I wanted to scream. I wanted to leap over the table and shake her. The audacity of this woman was boundless. She was rewriting my trauma as her tragedy. "Ms. Elena," the judge said, turning his attention to my side of the aisle, "does the defense have a response to these allegations?" Elena stood up slowly. She didn't pace. She didn't use big hand gestures. She just stood there, radiating a quiet, terrifying calm. "Your Honor," Elena said, her voice steady, "we do not just deny these allegations. We find them offensive. Jordan Banks dedicated 5 years of her young life to caring for her grandmother. But we are not here to debate character today. We are here to talk about the law." She picked up a single-sealed manila envelope from the table. It looked innocuous, thin and unassuming. "We believe," Elena continued, "that the plaintiff's entire case rests on a fundamental misunderstanding of the decedent's estate planning, and frankly, a misunderstanding of the plaintiff's own history." Patricia stopped fake crying. She lowered the tissue, her eyes narrowing behind her sunglasses. She looked at the envelope in Elena's hand, and for the first time since we walked into the courthouse, the smirk faltered. Just a fraction. I looked at the envelope, too. Elena hadn't told me what was in it. She had just told me to trust her, that she had found something in the public records that changed everything. "What is that?" Henderson demanded, breaking protocol. We haven't seen this evidence. This is an ambush." "It's public record, Mr. Henderson," Elena said coolly. "You could have found it if you had done your due diligence instead of relying on placemats." She walked toward the bench and handed the envelope to the bailiff, who passed it up to Judge Sterling. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the dying air conditioner and the rapid thumping of my own heart against my ribs. I felt lightheaded. This was it, the turning point. Either Elena had a miracle in that envelope, or we were about to be laughed out of court. Judge Sterling opened the seal. He pulled out a document, blue-backed, official, with a gold seal at the bottom. He adjusted his glasses again. He read the first page. He stopped. He frowned. He turned to the second page. And then the atmosphere in the room shifted. The judge's stoic expression cracked. The corners of his mouth twitched. He looked up from the paper, took off his glasses, and looked directly at Patricia. And he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It wasn't the smile of a benevolent grandfather. It was a dark, deeply amused smirk, a shark recognizing blood in the water. "Ma'am," the judge said to Patricia, his voice deceptively soft, "you're claiming total ownership based on inheritance laws and this placemat, correct?" Patricia, sensing the attention was back on her, straightened her spine. The smirk returned to her face, brighter than before. She thought she had him. She thought her charm was working. "Yes, Your Honor," she beamed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It's only fair. I'm her only daughter. It's my birthright." Judge Sterling looked at the paper, then back at her. He chuckled, a dry, rattling sound that echoed off the wood paneling. "Well," the judge said, leaning back in his leather chair, "this is ridiculous." "Excuse me?" Patricia's voice cracked, the smooth, polished veneer of the grieving daughter chipping away in an instant. Her eyebrows, perfectly sculpted arches of disbelief, shot up above the rim of her sunglasses. She looked like someone had just spoken to her in a language she didn't understand. Judge Sterling didn't answer her immediately. He seemed to be savoring the moment, a rare instance of judicial theater that broke the monotony of his docket. He held the document up, the blue backing catching the fluorescent light of the courtroom. "This," the judge said, his voice carrying to the back of the room where a few bored retirees were watching the proceedings, "is not a will, Mrs. Banks. This is a certified copy of a federal plea agreement from the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida. It is dated 12 years ago." The silence in the room deepened, becoming heavy and suffocating. I felt a frown crease my forehead. 12 years ago? I was barely a teenager then. Nana had never mentioned anything about federal courts or plea agreements. I looked at Elena, but she just gave me a small, tight nod, urging me to listen. "It seems," the judge continued, reading from the page with a meticulous slowness that was clearly driving my mother insane, "that your mother, the late Eleanor Banks, posted a cash bond of $250,000 to secure your release. You were facing a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence for, let's see here, 3 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering in Miami." Patricia froze. The color drained out of her face so fast that her heavy bronzer suddenly looked like a mask of orange clay, sitting on top of pale dough. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stared at the back of her head, my mind racing. Wire fraud? Money laundering? The pieces of my childhood started to click into a horrifying picture. I remembered that year. I remembered Patricia going away for work to Europe for 6 months. I remembered Nana being stressed, crying at the kitchen table late at night and selling her jewelry. I had always thought we were just broke. I didn't know we were buying my mother's freedom. "And," the judge said, flipping to the back of the document, "right here on page 14, clause 7b, there is a very interesting stipulation. To secure the bail money and Mrs. Eleanor Banks's silence regarding your co-conspirators, who I see were quite dangerous individuals, you," Patricia Banks, legally and irrevocably signed over all future claims to her estate as collateral. You traded your inheritance for your freedom over a decade ago, Patricia. You explicitly waived your right to contest any future will, trust, or deed transfer. The judge lowered the paper and peered over his spectacles, his eyes hard as flint. You don't even have standing to be in this courtroom, ma'am. You sold your birthright to stay out of federal prison. The breakdown was immediate and nuclear. Patricia leaped up, her chair screeching against the linoleum floor and toppling over with a deafening crash. She snatched the sunglasses off her face, revealing eyes that were wild with panic and rage. "That's a lie!" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "That's a forgery. My mother was a senile old bat. She tricked me. She told me she'd burn that." "Sit down, ma'am," the bailiff boomed, stepping forward, his hand resting on his belt. But Patricia was past the point of rationality. The narcissist's greatest fear is public exposure, and she had just been stripped naked in front of a judge, a lawyer, and her scapegoat daughter. She whirled around, pointing a manicured finger at me. "You knew!" she screamed, spit flying from her mouth. "You little witch! You and that old hag planned this. You think you can take what's mine? I'm the victim here. I'm the one who suffered." "Mrs. Banks, one more word, and I will hold you in contempt," Judge Sterling warned, his gavel hovering. "Contempt?" Patricia laughed, a shrill, hysterical sound. She lunged toward my table, her hands shaped into claws. "I'll show you contempt!" It was pure chaos. Henderson, her lawyer, tried to grab her arm, but she shook him off with shocking strength. The bailiff moved fast, intercepting her just before she reached the aisle. He grabbed her by the shoulders, restraining her as she thrashed and kicked, screaming obscenities that would have made a sailor blush. "She gaslit me!" Patricia howled as the bailiff dragged her toward the double doors. "She gaslit a federal judge! This is a conspiracy!" "Case dismissed with prejudice." Judge Sterling banged the gavel, the sound final and authoritative. "And Mr. Henderson, I suggest you advise your client that I will be forwarding that Denny's placemat will to the district attorney's office. I believe they take a very dim view of perjury and forgery in this county." The door swung shut, cutting off Patricia's screams. The silence that rushed back into the room was ringing in my ears. I sat there, stunned, my hands trembling in my lap. Elena closed her folder with a satisfied thwack. She turned to me, her face softening into a genuine smile. "Breathe, Jordan. It's over. You won." She signed it all away?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Nana knew? This whole time, Nana knew Patricia couldn't touch us." "Nana played the long game," Elena said, helping me stand up. "She knew Patricia would come back the second she died. She kept that plea agreement in a safety deposit box that only triggered upon her death certificate being issued. It was her final protection for you." Tears pricked my eyes, hot, stinging tears of relief and a fresh wave of grief. Nana had protected me from beyond the grave. Even while she was dying, even while she was in pain, she had made sure I wouldn't be left destitute. She had bailed her daughter out of prison, but she had saved her granddaughter from the fallout. We walked out of the courtroom and into the blinding Florida afternoon. The heat hit me like a physical wall, but for the first time in months, it didn't feel oppressive. It felt cleansing. The humidity wrapped around me, heavy and real, grounding me in the moment. I looked at the deed documents Elena had handed me. The Tampa bungalow, the Orlando condo, the Panhandle shack. They were mine, legally, irrevocably mine. "Thank you," I said to Elena, hugging her awkwardly on the courthouse steps. "I don't know how I can ever pay you." "You don't have to," she said. "Legal aid, remember? Just take care of yourself, Jordan. Your mom is going to be desperate now. The DA will likely pick up the perjury charge, but until she's in custody, watch your back. People like her don't handle losing well." "I blocked her number," I said, clutching the folder to my chest. "I'm changing the locks back today." "Good. Go home, get some sleep." I watched her walk away toward the parking lot, then turned toward my beat-up sedan. Patricia was nowhere to be seen, likely already dragged off the premises or hiding in her lawyer's car. I got into my car, the steering wheel burning my palms, and let out a scream, a long guttural release of 5 years of tension. Then I put the car in drive. The drive back to the bungalow was a blur of palm trees and strip malls. When I pulled into the driveway, the for sale sign Patricia had stuck in the yard was still there, leaning crookedly in the overgrown grass. I got out of the car, marched over to the sign, and ripped it out of the ground. I threw it into the neighbor's dumpster with a satisfying clang. I spent the rest of the afternoon reclaiming my space. I called a locksmith, who arrived within the hour to undo Patricia's handiwork. I dragged the black garbage bags of my clothes off the lawn and back into the house. The air inside was stale and hot. Patricia had turned off the AC to save money, but it smelled like Nana. It smelled of old books, lavender detergent, and dust. It smelled like home. By the time the sun began to set, painting the Florida sky in bruises of purple and orange, I was exhausted. I had unpacked my clothes, turned the AC back on, and ordered a pizza. I sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by boxes, feeling a strange, hollow peace. I thought it was over. I really did. I thought the drama was done, that the villain had been defeated and the credits were rolling. But Nana's life was never simple, and apparently, neither was her death. Around 9:30 p.m., I was finally unpacking the last box in the kitchen when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a notification from the new security system I had installed months ago. One of the few things I had splurged on when Nana first got sick, paranoid about intruders. Patricia hadn't known the Wi-Fi password to disable it, so it had just been offline while the power was cut. I had reconnected it an hour ago. Motion detected. Backyard tool shed. I froze. The backyard was fenced in. There shouldn't be anyone back there. Maybe it was a raccoon or a stray cat. I picked up my phone and tapped the notification. The screen went black for a second, buffering before the live feed flickered into view. The camera was mounted on the back porch, pointing toward the overgrown garden and the old, rotting tool shed Nana had used for potting plants. The night vision turned everything into ghostly shades of gray and green. At first I didn't see anything, just the swaying of the banana leaves in the wind. Then I saw him. A man was standing by the door of the shed. He wasn't a raccoon. He was tall, wearing a hoodie pulled up over a baseball cap, obscuring his face. He was standing perfectly still, as if he knew the camera was there. In his right hand he held a shovel, a long, rusted spade that looked like it had seen heavy use. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was this Patricia? Did she hire someone to scare me? As I watched, the man moved. He didn't try to break into the shed. He didn't come toward the house. Instead, he turned his head slowly, lifting his chin until he was looking directly at the camera lens. Even through the grainy, pixelated feed, I could feel the weight of his stare. He raised the shovel, pointed it at the ground near the base of the shed, and then, in a motion that was chillingly casual, he put a finger to his lips. Shh. The feed cut out. I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the linoleum, the screen cracking. Nana had left me the houses, the money, and the victory. But as I stared at the dark kitchen window, realizing that the man wasn't trying to break in, but was trying to dig something up, I realized she had left me something else, too. She had left me a lot of secrets buried in the yard, and someone had come to collect them. My fingers were slippery with sweat as I snatched my phone off the linoleum floor. The screen was shattered in a spiderweb pattern, splintering the image of the dark backyard, but the touch sensors still worked. I punched in 911, my breath hitching in my throat like a hiccup that wouldn't go away. 911, what is your emergency? There's a man in my backyard, I whispered, sliding my back down the cabinets until I was sitting on the floor well below the level of the window. He has a shovel. He was staring at the camera. Address? Ma'am? I rattled off the address of the bungalow, my voice trembling. Please hurry. The camera feed cut out. I don't know where he is now. Is the house locked? Yes, I think so. I wasn't sure. I had been bringing boxes in earlier. Had I locked the back slider? I scrambled to my feet, grabbing a serrated bread knife from the magnetic strip on the wall. It felt ridiculously light and inadequate, a toy against the darkness pressing against the glass. I crept into the living room, checking the deadbolt on the front door, then sprinted to the back sliding glass door. The latch was down. Locked. I peered out through the blinds. The backyard was a wall of black. The motion sensor light, which should have been triggered by anyone moving near the shed, was dark. Had he disabled it? Or was he standing perfectly still, blending into the shadows of the mango tree? The 10 minutes it took for the police to arrive felt like 10 years. Every creak of the old house settling, every rustle of palm fronds against the siding, sounded like footsteps. I stood in the hallway, the knife shaking in my hand, imagining the man with the shovel smashing through the glass. When the blue and red lights finally washed over the living room walls, I nearly collapsed with relief. 2 officers did a sweep of the perimeter. I watched from the porch, arms wrapped around myself, as their flashlights cut beams through the humid night air. They checked the shed. They checked behind the AC unit. They even shone their lights up into the mango tree. "Nothing, ma'am," the older officer said, hitching up his belt as he walked back to me. He looked bored, like this was his 3rd hysterical woman call of the night. Gates latched from the inside, no sign of forced entry. "But I saw him," I insisted, pointing at my cracked phone. "On the camera. He was right there by the shed. He had a shovel." "We checked the shed," the officer said, clicking his pen. "Doors rusted shut. Doesn't look like it's been opened in years. And the ground? Undisturbed. No fresh digging." I stared at him. He didn't dig. He pointed. He pointed at the ground and went, "Shh." The officer exchanged a look with his partner, a look that said crazy. "Look, Ms. Banks, you've had a stressful day. We heard about the court case on the news. Inheritance disputes get nasty. Maybe it was a neighbor, or maybe the shadows played tricks on you." "I am not hallucinating," I snapped, the adrenaline turning into frustration. Someone was here. "We'll file a report for trespassing," he said, handing me a card. "Get some sleep. Lock your doors." They left. The silence that rushed back into the bungalow was heavier than before. I didn't sleep. I spent the night sitting on the couch with the lights on and the bread knife on the coffee table, watching the feed from the front door camera, waiting for a shovel to smash through a window. When the sun finally rose, bleeding a hazy gray light through the blinds, I felt brittle. The terror of the night had hardened into a cold, sharp determination. I wasn't Patricia. I didn't fold when things got scary. I was the girl who navigated the bureaucracy of hospice care and Medicare Part D. I could handle a trespasser. I drank a cup of black coffee, put on my boots, and marched into the backyard. The morning air was thick, smelling of wet grass and impending rain. I walked straight to the tool shed. The officers were right about one thing. The padlock on the door was a rusted lump of iron. But they were wrong about the ground. I knelt near the corner of the shed, exactly where the man had stood. The grass here was long and unkempt, but if you looked closely, really closely, you could see the depression. 2 heavy boot prints pressed into the soft, sandy soil. I knew it. I looked at where he had pointed. The ground there looked normal, covered in a layer of dead leaves. But when I brushed the leaves away, the soil was darker, looser. I ran back to the patio, grabbed the spare garden spade Nana kept in a bucket, and returned to the spot. I dug. The soil was soft, easy to move. Someone had dug here recently and filled it back in. My heart hammered against my ribs. What was I looking for? A body? Drugs? About 2 feet down, my spade hit something hard. Clang. It wasn't a rock. The sound was metallic and hollow. I dropped the spade and used my hands, clawing the dirt away frantically. Slowly, a shape emerged. It was a black, waterproof pelican case, about the size of a shoebox, caked in mud. I pulled it out, groaning at the weight. It was heavy. I sat back on my heels, panting, staring at the box. This was what the man wanted me to find. Or maybe this was what he wanted to find. But something spooked him? No, the shh gesture was for me. He was guiding me. I wiped the mud off the latches and popped them open. The seal hissed as the air pressure equalized. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, were 3 things. First, a thick stack of cash, $100 bills, wrapped in rubber bands. It had to be at least $10,000. Second, a set of keys, old-fashioned brass keys labeled with yellowed tags. One tag read Orlando. The other read Panhandle. Third, a leather-bound notebook. My hands trembled as I picked up the notebook. I opened it to the first page. It wasn't a diary. It was a ledger. Dates, amounts, and names I didn't recognize. The entries went back 12 years, right around the time of Patricia's plea deal. I flipped to the very last entry. It was dated 2 days before Nana died. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible, but the message was clear. He knows about the swampland. If anything happens to me, check the floorboards in the Panhandle house. Trust no one, especially not... The sentence cut off. I wouldn't open that if I were you. The voice came from behind me, deep, gravelly, and distinctly male. I screamed, scrambling to my feet and spinning around, clutching the heavy box to my chest like a shield. Standing at the back gate, leaning casually against the wood as if he had been there for 10 minutes, was a man. He was white, tall, with broad shoulders that strained against a faded gray t-shirt. He had messy, dark blonde hair and a jawline covered in a few days of stubble. He looked rough around the edges, like he worked with his hands, but his eyes, a startling clear blue, were sharp and intelligent. He wasn't the man from the camera. He wasn't wearing a hoodie, and he didn't have a shovel. But he had a key to my gate in his hand. "Who are you?" I demanded, backing up until my spine hit the shed. "How did you get in here?" He held up the key. "I have a key. Your grandmother gave it to me." "Nana gave you a key?" I narrowed my eyes. "I lived here for 5 years. I've never seen you." "I worked the night shift," he said, taking a step forward. He didn't look threatening, but he was big, and I was alone in a backyard with a box full of illicit cash. "I'm Grant Turner. I did the heavy maintenance for Eleanor, roof repairs, storm shutters, hauling junk." "Nana didn't have money for a contractor," I countered. "I didn't charge her," Grant said. He stopped a respectful distance away, his eyes flicking to the box in my arms. "She helped my mom out a long time ago. I owed her." He gestured to the Pelican case. "She told me that if she died, and if Patricia started sniffing around, I was supposed to make sure you found that. I was coming to dig it up for you last night, but I saw the cops." I froze. "You were here last night?" "No." Grant shook his head. "I drove by, saw the lights, figured you were already spooked, so I didn't stop. But I saw the guy, Jordan." My breath caught. "You saw him? The man in the hoodie?" Grant's expression darkened. He looked toward the fence line, his jaw tightening. "Yeah, I saw him running down the alleyway when the squad car turned the corner, and you need to listen to me very carefully." He looked back at me, his blue eyes intense. "That wasn't a thief, and that wasn't a neighbor. That was a cleaner. And if you found that box, it means your grandmother stole something very valuable from very bad people. We need to get you out of the open, now." "Get inside," Grant said, his voice low and urgent. He didn't wait for my permission. He stepped forward, grabbed my elbow with a grip that was firm but not painful, and steered me toward the backsliding door. "Stop staring at me and move, Jordan. If I saw you dig that up, so did anyone else watching the house." My instinct was to fight him, to swing the heavy Pelican case at his head and scream for the neighbors. But the terror in his eyes was real. It wasn't the manic, self-serving panic of my mother. It was the calculated, sharp alertness of a soldier in a war zone. I let him push me through the door, the cool air conditioning hitting my sweat-drenched skin like a shock. He slammed the slider shut and threw the latch, then immediately moved to the kitchen window, peering through the slats of the blinds. "Who are you really?" I asked, backing away from him until the kitchen island was between us. I hugged the muddy box to my chest. "And don't give me that handyman crap. Nana didn't have money for a bodyguard." Grant turned from the window, his expression grim. "I was a handyman. That part is true. But before that, I was in the Army, MP. Your grandmother hired me 3 years ago to fix the roof after Hurricane Ian. She caught me checking the perimeter one night because I saw a car idling too long across the street. She didn't fire me. She offered me double to keep an eye on things." "Keep an eye on what?" "On you," he said. The admission hung in the air. "And on Patricia." He walked over to the sink, washed his hands quickly, and dried them on a dish towel. "Open the box again. Let's see how bad it is." I hesitated, then set the case on the granite countertop. I popped the latches. The smell of mildew and old paper wafted out. Grant ignored the stacks of cash, $50,000 easily, maybe more, and picked up the leather-bound ledger. He flipped through the pages with a practiced efficiency, his eyes scanning the columns of numbers and names. "Damn it, Eleanor," he muttered under his breath. "You kept the receipts." "What does that mean?" I demanded. "What receipts?" Grant tossed the ledger onto the counter, open to a page dated from 2012, the same year as Patricia's plea deal. "You know your mom got pinched for wire fraud, but do you know whose money she was moving?" "No," I whispered. "The judge just said dangerous individuals." "Try the Gulf Coast Syndicate," Grant said, the name dropping like a stone. "They run narcotics and gambling from Tampa to Biloxi. Patricia wasn't just skimming off the top. She was their laundry woman. When she got caught, she was going to flip on them to save her own skin. That's why she needed bail. That's why she needed Nana." My head was spinning. My mother, the woman who cried if her mimosa wasn't cold enough, was a money launderer for a crime syndicate. It seemed impossible, and yet it explained everything. The frantic mood swings, the sudden trips, the obsession with money. "Nana paid her bail," I said, piecing it together, "and she made Patricia sign away the inheritance." "Nana did more than that," Grant corrected, tapping the ledger. "She paid off the syndicate. She emptied her retirement, sold her jewelry, and probably took out a second mortgage on this place to pay back what Patricia stole. But Nana wasn't stupid. She knew that as long as the syndicate existed, Patricia, and by extension, you, would never be safe. So she kept a record. Every transaction Patricia made, every name, every account number. This book is an insurance policy. It's the leverage that kept you all alive for 12 years. I looked at the innocent-looking notebook. It wasn't just paper, it was a bomb. "So why now?" I asked. "Why is someone digging in my yard now?" "Because Nana is dead," Grant said bluntly. "The insurance policy has expired. The syndicate knows the old woman is gone and they want their dirty laundry back before it falls into the hands of the feds. Or," he looked at me significantly, "before Patricia tries to sell it to them." My blood ran cold. "You think Patricia is working with them?" "I think Patricia is broke, desperate, and morally bankrupt," Grant said. "If she thinks she can trade this book for a payout, she will. But the syndicate doesn't do refunds. They do cleaning. That guy last night, the one with the shovel, he wasn't looking for money. He was looking for this book. And if he had found you instead—" He didn't have to finish the sentence. The image of the man putting a finger to his lips, "Shh," flashed in my mind. He wasn't quieting me. He was silencing a witness. "We have to go to the police," I said, reaching for my phone. Grant's hand shot out, covering mine. "No police. Half the guys on the payroll in this county are on the syndicate's Christmas list. You call 911 and you're just announcing your location to the people trying to kill you. Then what do we do?" I felt the panic rising again, hot and choking. "I can't stay here. No, You can't, Grant agreed. He reached into the box and pulled out the set of keys. He held up the one with the yellow tag that read, Panhandle. Nana left you a map. Check the floorboards in the Panhandle house. She moved something there. Something more important than the ledger. The Panhandle house is a shack, I said. I've never even been there. It's in the middle of nowhere. Exactly, Grant said. It's off the grid. Hard to find if you don't know the back roads. We need to go there, find whatever she hid, and then we leverage it to get the FBI involved. The real FBI out of D.C., not the local field office. We? I looked at him. You're not involved in this. Grant looked at me, his blue eyes softening for the first time. I promised Eleanor I'd look out for you. I don't break promises. Besides, I'm already involved. The cleaner saw me last night. If they take you out, they'll come for me next just to tie up the loose end. We're in this together, Jordan. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He was rough, unpolished, and dangerous in a way that made my suburban sensibilities scream run. But he was also the only person standing between me and a man with a shovel. Okay, I breathed. Okay, we go to the Panhandle. Pack a bag, Grant ordered, moving back to the window. 5 minutes, essentials only. No electronics that can be tracked. Leave your phone. Leave my phone? Do you want to live, or do you want to check Instagram? I ran to my bedroom. My hands were shaking as I threw clothes into a duffel bag. Jeans, t-shirts, extra socks. I grabbed the cash from the Pelican case and shoved it into the bottom of the bag. I hesitated over my phone on the nightstand, seeing a string of missed calls from an unknown number. Patricia or the cleaner? I left the phone. I ran back out to the living room. Grant was by the front door, peering through the peephole. His body was tense, coiled like a spring. Change of plans, he whispered. What? 2 cars just pulled up, SUVs, tinted windows. They're blocking the driveway. My heart stopped. Police? No plates, Grant said, backing away from the door. Not police. A heavy pounding shook the front door, rattling the frame. Boom, boom, boom. Jordan Banks, a voice shouted from outside. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Open the door. Back door, Grant hissed, grabbing my arm. Now! We bolted for the kitchen. Grant slid the glass door open, and the humidity hit us again. We sprinted across the patio, past the hole I had dug, toward the back gate. I heard the sound of wood splintering inside the house, the front door being kicked in. Hey! Someone shouted from the side yard. I looked left. A man in a suit was sprinting around the corner of the house, a gun in his hand. Go! Grant shoved me through the gate into the alleyway. Run to the end of the block. My truck is the black Ford. I didn't look back. I ran. I ran past the overflowing trash cans, past the barking dogs behind fences, my duffel bag banging against my hip. I heard a pop-pop sound behind me, like firecrackers, but sharper. Gunshots. I reached the end of the alley and saw the black Ford F-150 parked on the curb. I scrambled for the handle, tearing the door open and diving into the passenger seat. Grant was right behind me, diving into the driver's side. He slammed the door and twisted the key. The engine roared to life. Get down, he yelled, throwing his arm across my chest to pin me to the seat. The back window shattered, showering us in safety glass as he floored the gas. The truck fishtailed onto the main road, tires screaming, leaving the bungalow and my old life shrinking in the rearview mirror. The wind roared through the shattered back window of the Ford F-150 like a jet engine, whipping my hair into a frenzy and carrying the distinct metallic scent of terror. Shards of safety glass littered the back seat and crunched beneath my boots every time I shifted my weight, a constant glittering reminder of how close I had just come to death. Grant didn't slow down. His knuckles were white against the steering wheel, his eyes flicking constantly between the road ahead and the rearview mirror. We were weaving through the dense mid-morning traffic of I-275, cutting off a minivan and a delivery truck with a recklessness that would have terrified me an hour ago. Now it felt necessary. "Are you hit?" Grant barked over the rushing wind. His voice was tight, controlled. I patted my chest, my arms, my legs. I felt the phantom sting of the bullets, the way the air had seemed to snap as they passed, but there was no blood, just the dull ache of adrenaline crashing through my system. "No!" I shouted back, my voice sounding thin and foreign to my own ears. "I'm okay. Are they following us?" "I don't see the SUVs," Grant said, merging across 3 lanes to take the exit toward Ocala. "But that doesn't mean they're gone. They'll have a bolo out on my truck within 20 minutes if they have friends in the highway patrol." "Friends in the highway patrol?" I stared at him, hugging my duffel bag closer. "Grant, who are these people? You said syndicate, but that sounds like something from a movie." "It's real enough," Grant said grimly. He finally slowed the truck down to a somewhat legal speed as we hit the long, flat stretch of highway heading north. The landscape outside blurred into a monotonous ribbon of sawgrass, billboards for personal injury lawyers, and endless construction zones. The Gulf Coast Syndicate runs the port traffic. Drugs in, stolen cars out. Your mother wasn't just a cog in the machine, Jordan. She was the grease. She moved their money through shell companies, real estate, and offshore accounts. She knew where every dime was buried. I looked down at the Pelican case resting on the floorboard between my feet, and Nana knew too. "Eleanor found out when Patricia got arrested," Grant explained. "She didn't just pay the bail, she made a deal with the devil to keep you safe. She promised the syndicate that Patricia would keep her mouth shut and that the ledger, the one in that box, would never see the light of day. As long as Nana was alive and sitting on that evidence, it was a stalemate, mutually assured destruction." "But Nana died," I whispered. "And the truce died with her," Grant finished. "Patricia probably tried to make a new deal. 'I'll give you the book if you give me my cut.' But she didn't have the book. Nana hid it. So the syndicate sent the cleaners to find it before Patricia could, or to kill anyone who might know where it was." I felt a wave of nausea. My mother had effectively put a hit out on me by trying to sell a secret she didn't even possess. It was the ultimate act of narcissism, risking my life for a payday she hadn't earned. We drove in silence for another hour. The Florida heat radiated off the asphalt, creating mirages that shimmered on the horizon. Grant turned off the main highway, navigating a series of back roads that wound through orange groves and small, dusted-over towns that looked like they hadn't changed since the 1970s. He pulled the truck behind an abandoned gas station that was little more than a graffiti-covered husk. The roof had caved in and vines were reclaiming the pumps. "Why are we stopping?" I asked, panic flaring again. "We need to ditch the plates," Grant said, killing the engine. "And we need to clean out the glass. We look like a rolling target." He hopped out, grabbing a screwdriver from his tool belt. I followed him, my legs feeling like jelly. The silence of the countryside was jarring after the roar of the highway. Crickets buzzed in the tall grass, and somewhere in the distance, a crow cawed. I helped him sweep the shattered glass out of the cab with a piece of cardboard we found near a dumpster. Grant worked with efficient, brutal movements. He swapped the license plate with one he pulled from under the driver's seat, a rusted Florida plate that looked decades old. "Where did you get that?" I asked. "Junkyard," he grunted. "I keep spares. Old habits." He walked around the truck, inspecting the bullet holes in the tailgate. There were 2 of them, punched clean through the metal. He covered them with a piece of duct tape, then rubbed dirt over the tape to blend it in. It wasn't a perfect fix, but from a distance, it just looked like rust. "Jordan," he said, stopping to look at me. He leaned against the truck bed, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "I need you to look at the ledger again. Nana said she moved something more important to the Panhandle house. Is there anything in the book that references the Panhandle property specifically? A code?" A date? I sat on the tailgate and opened the leather-bound notebook. My hands were steady now, a strange, calm numbness taking over. I flipped past the pages of bank routing numbers and offshore accounts. I looked for the year Nana bought the Panhandle shack. It was 2015. I found the entry. October 14th, 2015. Purchase. 40 acres, Liberty County. The Swamp. Paid cash. Underneath the purchase entry, in different ink, Nana had written a single line of text. It didn't look like financial data. It looked like a Bible verse, but the citation was wrong. John 8:32. The truth shall set you free, but the lie keeps you safe. Look beneath the foundation where the water rises. Look beneath the foundation where the water rises. I read aloud. That sounds ominous. It sounds like the Panhandle, Grant muttered. That whole property is on a floodplain. The house is built on stilts. There's something else, I said, squinting at the page. In the margins, there are initials, JS and a date next to them. The date is from last week. Grant froze. He walked over and looked at the book over my shoulder. Last week? Nana was in hospice last week. She couldn't write. She didn't write this, I realized, tracing the letters. The ink was different. Ballpoint, not the fountain pen Nana favored. Someone else wrote this. JS visited her. JS, Grant repeated. He looked at me, his eyes widening. Jordan. Who was the judge in your case yesterday? Judge Sterling, I said. Why? Sterling, Grant said, the name tasting like poison. JS Judge Sterling. You think the judge visited Nana? I shook my head. That doesn't make sense. He ruled in my favor. He humiliated Patricia. He exposed the plea deal. Did he? Grant paced a small circle in the dirt. Think about it. He exposed the plea deal, which legally cut Patricia out. That stopped her from getting the houses. But who gets the houses now? You do. And where are the secrets hidden? In the houses. He wanted me to have the property, I realized, the horror dawning on me. Because if Patricia got it, she'd just sell it to the highest bidder or lose it to the syndicate. But if I have it, I'm easier to target. Or maybe he thinks I'm easier to manipulate. He cleared the board, Grant said. He got Patricia out of the way so the syndicate, or whoever he's working for, could come straight to the source. The judge isn't a hero, Jordan. He's the cleaner's boss. My phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter back in Tampa, was obviously gone. But Grant had a burner flip phone. He pulled it out of his pocket and checked the screen. We have a problem, he said quietly. What now? I have a police scanner app on here. It's patchy. But I just picked up a dispatch from Hillsborough County Fire Rescue. He held the phone out so I could hear the tinny, crackling voice. Structure fire fully involved at 4002 Palm Avenue. Suspected gas main rupture. Witnesses report an explosion. No survivors located at the scene. I leaned back against the truck, the metal digging into my spine. 402 Palm Avenue. That was the bungalow. They blew it up, I whispered. Tears blurred my vision, hot and fast. Nana's books, her quilt, the photos of my dad. They blew it up to cover their tracks, Grant said, his voice hard, and to kill us. As far as the world knows, Jordan Banks died in a gas explosion today. He grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at him. Listen to me, this is actually good. Good? I choked out a laugh. My home is a crater. It's good because they think they succeeded, Grant insisted. If they think you're dead, they stop hunting. It buys us time. We have a lead. We have a 6-hour head start to the Panhandle. We get there. We find what Nana hid under the floorboards, and we burn them all down, not with fire, with the truth. He squeezed my shoulders. Are you with me? I wiped my face with my shirt sleeve, smearing soot and sweat across my cheek. I thought about the judge's smile, that smug, amused smirk as he handed me a death sentence disguised as a victory. I thought about Patricia, probably watching the news right now, wondering if she had finally won by default. I'm with you, I said. Let's go to the swamp. Grant nodded, satisfied. We climbed back into the truck. As we pulled onto the dusty back road, heading north toward the deep, wild heart of Florida, I looked at the ledger one last time. The truth shall set you free. Nana was right, but she forgot to mention that the truth is also heavy, and sometimes you have to carry it through hell before you can set it down. The drive north was a descent into a version of Florida that tourists never see, and travel brochures pretend doesn't exist. We left behind the manicured palm trees and pastel strip malls of the coast, trading them for the claustrophobic embrace of endless pine forests and desolate two-lane highways that cut through the dark heart of the state. By the time we crossed the Suwannee River, the sun was beginning to dip below the tree line, casting long skeletal shadows across the dashboard of the Ford F-150. My phone was gone, destroyed back in Tampa or sitting in an evidence locker, but I didn't need a screen to know that I was currently the lead story on the 6 o'clock news. Local woman presumed dead in gas explosion. It was a surreal, out-of-body sensation, like attending your own funeral while speeding away from it at 70 miles per hour. "You're quiet," Grant said. He hadn't turned on the radio. The only soundtrack to our escape was the hum of the tires and the occasional rattle of the broken glass we hadn't managed to sweep out of the door jams. "I'm dead," I murmured, staring out at a passing field of overgrown kudzu that looked like green monsters swallowing an old barn. "According to the world, I'm ash. It's a lot to process." "Being dead has its advantages," Grant said, his eyes scanning the road for state troopers. "No debt collectors, no toxic family members, and nobody looks for a ghost." "Patricia is probably already trying to sue the gas company," I said bitterly. "She won't mourn me. She'll monetize me." "Then let her," Grant said. "Let her think she won. The more comfortable she gets, the messier she'll be. And when we come back from the dead, we'll catch her with her hand in the cookie jar." We crossed into the panhandle just as night truly fell. This part of the state was different. Wilder, older, and infinitely more menacing. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of wet earth, decaying vegetation, and the briny tang of the distant Gulf. We were in Liberty County now, a place of deep forests and deeper secrets, where cell service went to die, and the law felt like a suggestion rather than a rule. Nana's forgotten shack was located on a tract of land bordering the Apalachicola National Forest. I had to navigate Grant using the coordinates from the ledger because there were no street signs. We turned off the paved road onto a dirt track that was barely wide enough for the truck. Branches scraped against the sides of the vehicle like fingernails, screeching in protest. "This is it," I said, squinting at the odometer. 0.4 miles down this track. Look for a clearing." The truck headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating a wall of saw palmettos and cypress knees. And then the trees opened up. The house sat in the center of a muddy clearing, looking less like a home and more like a shipwreck that had drifted inland. It was a wooden structure built on tall, concrete stilts, pilings designed to keep it above the floodwaters of the nearby river. The wood was gray and weathered, the tin roof rusted to a burnt orange. It looked abandoned, reclaiming its place in the swamp. Grant killed the engine. The silence that followed was instant and oppressive, filled only by the deafening chorus of crickets and bullfrogs. "Friendly place," Grant muttered, grabbing a heavy-duty flashlight from the glove box. "Stay close. This is snake country, and gator country, and probably meth lab country." We stepped out into the humid night. The ground was spongy beneath my boots, threatening to suck them down with every step. I shined my own smaller flashlight toward the house. The stairs leading up to the front porch were missing several planks, looking like a gap-toothed smile. "Nana bought this in 2015, I whispered. "She never rented it out. She never even visited as far as I knew." "She visited," Grant said, walking toward the underbelly of the house. "You don't buy 40 acres of swamp unless you need to hide something." We bypassed the stairs and went underneath the structure. The space between the muddy ground and the floorboards above was about 6 feet high. A shadowy forest of concrete pilings and hanging cobwebs. "The clue," I said, reciting the words from the ledger. "Look beneath the foundation where the water rises." Grant swept his flashlight beam across the concrete pillars. "We're looking for a water line, a high water mark." We moved slowly, the mud squelching. I shone my light on the piling nearest the riverside. The concrete was stained dark brown about 4 feet up, marking where the swamp water peaked during flood season. "Here," I called out. "The stains are highest on these 3 pillars." Grant moved over to me. He inspected the pillar, then looked up at the floor joists directly above it. If I were an old lady hiding a box, I wouldn't bury it. I couldn't dig through this root system. I'd attach it. He shone the light upwards. The underbelly of the house was covered in black, landscaping fabric and insulation, mostly torn and hanging in ribbons. But directly above the high-water mark, there was a patch of wood that looked newer than the rest, a small square panel screwed into the floor joists. "Bingo," Grant breathed. He reached up. He was tall enough to touch it. He pulled a multi-tool from his belt and began unscrewing the panel. The screws were rusted, screeching in protest, but they turned. "Hold the light steady," he grunted. I kept the beam focused on his hands. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What was in there? More money? A gun? The missing piece of the puzzle that explained why a judge would visit a dying woman. The last screw came free. Grant lowered the wooden panel carefully. It wasn't a hollow space. Attached to the other side of the panel, resting heavily in Grant's hands, was a metal firebox. It was gray, industrial, and locked with a keypad. "We need a code," Grant said, setting the heavy box down on a dry patch of ground near the piling. 4 digits. I stared at the keypad. Nana didn't leave a code in the ledger. "Think," Grant urged. "She wouldn't write it down. It has to be something you'd know, something Patricia wouldn't." I racked my brain. My birthday? No. Patricia knew that. Nana's anniversary? Too obvious. I thought about the text in the ledger again. John 8:32. "Try 0832, I suggested. Grant punched it in. The light on the lock blinked red. "Beep, beep." "Wrong," he said. 2 more tries before these things usually lock out for good." I closed my eyes, trying to channel Nana. I thought about the day she died. I thought about the plea deal. I thought about the shh from the man in the yard. The lie keeps you safe. "Try the date of the plea deal," I said. "The day Patricia sold her soul. Nana said it was the day she bought my future." "Do you know the date?" "I saw it in court," I said, visualizing the blue-back document Judge Sterling had held up. "October 14th, 10:14. Grant hesitated, his finger hovering over the keys. "You sure?" "Do it." He pressed the buttons. 1, 0, 1, 4. The light blinked green. A mechanical click echoed in the quiet swamp. Grant looked at me, a flicker of impressed surprise in his blue eyes. He lifted the lid. Inside the box, there was no money. There were no jewels. There was a single thick manila envelope and a digital voice recorder, the old-fashioned kind with buttons on the side. I reached for the envelope first. It wasn't sealed. I pulled out the contents. They were photographs, grainy black and white surveillance photos, clearly taken with a long-range lens. I shuffled through them, my breath catching in my throat. The first photo showed a younger Patricia, looking glamorous and terrified, handing a briefcase to a man on a boat. The second photo showed the man taking the briefcase. I recognized him instantly. It was Judge Sterling. He looked younger, his hair less gray, but that same arrogant jawline was unmistakable. "Holy hell," Grant whispered, looking over my shoulder. Sterling wasn't just on the payroll. He was the bagman. He was the one collecting the laundered money from Patricia. I flipped to the third photo. It was dated much later. It showed Nana. She was sitting on a park bench, looking frail. Sitting next to her, holding her hand, was Judge Sterling. But he didn't look arrogant in this one. He looked afraid. Why would he be afraid of her? I asked, confused. He's the powerful one. "Play the recorder," Grant said. I picked up the small silver device. My thumb trembled over the play button. I pressed it. There was a hiss of static, and then Nana's voice filled the swamp clearing. She sounded weak, breathless, but her tone was steel. "This is Eleanor Banks. The date is November 3rd. I had a visitor today. The Honorable Judge Sterling came to say his goodbyes, or rather he came to see if I was dead yet." A pause. Then a different voice. A man's voice, smooth, cultured, and terrified. "Eleanor, please, you have to give me the originals. The syndicate is cleaning house. If they find out I let you keep evidence against them for 12 years, they won't just kill me, they'll kill my family." Nana's voice returned, sharper this time. "You should have thought of that when you took their blood money, Richard. You helped them destroy my daughter. You let them turn her into a criminal. I kept your secret to keep Patricia out of jail, but I never promised to destroy it." "What do you want?" the judge asked. "Money? I can get you millions." "I don't want your money," Nana rasped. "I want you to protect her. When I'm gone, Patricia will come for the estate. She's greedy and she's stupid. If she gets the houses, the syndicate will find the ledger. You are going to ensure that my granddaughter, Jordan, gets everything. You are going to rule in her favor. You are going to humiliate Patricia so publicly that she runs away and hides. And if I do, then the evidence stays buried. But if you fail, if Jordan is harmed, or if you try to cross me, my handyman knows where the bodies are buried, and he has instructions to send this tape to the FBI." The recording clicked off. I stared at the device in my hand, stunned. The judge hadn't smiled at me in court because he thought the situation was funny. He smiled because he was terrified. He was performing a script Nana had written for him on her deathbed. He had to give me the houses to save his own life. "He did his part," I whispered. "He gave me the houses." "But he couldn't stop the syndicate," Grant said, his face grim. "He ruled in your favor, but the syndicate realized the leak wasn't plugged, so they decided to burn the whole board. That's why the house exploded. They're not just cleaning up Patricia's mess, they're cleaning up the judge's mess." "So the judge is a target too?" "Maybe," Grant said. "Or maybe he's trying to find us before they do." Suddenly, a bright beam of light cut through the trees, sweeping across the clearing. We heard the crunch of tires on gravel, fast, aggressive tires. Grant killed his flashlight instantly. "Get down!" He tackled me into the mud, shoving me behind a thick concrete piling, just as a black SUV roared into the clearing, its high beams illuminating the house on stilts like a stage. Two men jumped out. They weren't wearing suits this time. They were wearing tactical gear, and they were carrying assault rifles. "Check the perimeter," one of them shouted. "The tracker says the truck is here." Grant looked at me, his face inches from mine, smeared with mud. He pointed to the firebox, then to the dark expanse of the swamp behind the house. "Run," he mouthed. "Into the water." The water of the swamp wasn't just cold, it was thick. It felt less like liquid and more like a living, breathing entity that grabbed at my ankles with fingers made of silt and decay. I didn't have time to hesitate. Grant's command, "Run," was still ringing in my ears as I scrambled backward, away from the concrete pilings and the blinding headlights of the SUV. I shoved the manila envelope and the voice recorder inside my shirt, praying the fabric would keep them dry, and slid down the muddy embankment into the black water. It rose instantly to my waist, stealing the breath from my lungs. The smell hit me next, a pungent mix of sulfur, rotting vegetation, and stagnant mud. "Keep low," Grant hissed, sliding into the water beside me. He didn't make a splash. He moved with a terrifying silence, grabbing my arm and towing me deeper into the cypress forest that bordered the clearing. "Don't lift your feet. Drag them. Splashing is noise." Behind us, the clearing erupted into chaos. Doors slammed. Voices barked orders in sharp, clipped bursts. "Clear the structure." "2 targets, dangerous, authorized to terminate." Authorized to terminate. The clinical nature of the phrase sent a spike of pure adrenaline through my veins. They weren't here to arrest us. They were here to erase us. We waded deeper. The water crept up to my chest. Every submerged branch that brushed against my leg felt like an alligator. Every hanging vine that touched my face felt like a snake. I wanted to scream, to thrash, to run, but Grant's grip on my arm was an anchor. He moved us toward a dense cluster of cypress knees, knobby roots protruding from the water like skeletal fingers. "Get behind the root ball," Grant whispered, pushing me into the small cavern created by the twisted roots of a massive tree. "Shoulder deep, chin in the water. Do it." I crouched, the murky water rising to my neck. The mud at the bottom was soft and slimy, sucking at my boots. Grant crouched beside me, smearing handfuls of wet mud over his face and neck. He reached out and did the same to me, his rough hands covering my cheeks and forehead in cold, stinking muck. "Thermal," he breathed into my ear. "The mud masks the heat signature. Stay still. Even if you see a snake, even if you feel a leech, do not move." A second later, a beam of white light cut through the trees, sweeping over the surface of the black water. It was followed by a red laser grid that danced across the Spanish moss, hanging above us. "Truck is clear," a voice shouted from the clearing, sounding impossibly close. "Hood is warm. They were here 5 minutes ago. Check the perimeter. Deploy the drone." Drone. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I was sure it would ripple the water surface. A low buzzing sound like an angry hornet rose above the chirping of the crickets. I pressed my back against the slimy wood of the cypress root, squeezing my eyes shut. I focused on the plastic casing of the recorder pressing against my skin under my shirt. That tape was the only thing keeping me alive, and it was the very reason they wanted me dead. The drone whirred overhead, its camera sweeping the swamp. The red laser grid passed over our hiding spot. Lingering for a terrifying second on the root ball, I held my breath until my lungs burned. "Movement in Sector 4, the radio crackled. "Wild boar. Ignore the wildlife. Find the girl. The handyman is collateral, but we need the package." The drone moved on. The flashlight swept further east, away from us. "They think we ran for the road," Grant whispered, his lips barely moving. "They expect panic. They expect us to run fast. We're going to move slow." We stayed in the water for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 20 minutes. My teeth began to chatter, the vibration shaking my whole body. Grant wrapped an arm around my shoulders, pulling me tight against his side to share warmth and stabilize me. In the darkness covered in mud, hiding from a death squad, the barrier between stranger and ally evaporated completely. "We have to move," Grant decided finally. "They're circling back. We need to get to the river channel." "Gators," I whimpered, the word escaping before I could stop it. "The gators are asleep or afraid of the noise," Grant lied. I knew he was lying, but I appreciated it. "The men with the guns are the apex predators tonight, Jordan. Let's go." We moved through the swamp with agonizing slowness. Grant led the way, testing the depth with every step. The water fluctuated, sometimes dropping to our knees, sometimes rising to our chins. We navigated by the faint moonlight filtering through the canopy. After a mile of trudging through the muck, the trees began to thin. The stagnant smell of the swamp was replaced by a fresher, moving current. We had reached the main channel of the river. Grant pulled me up onto a muddy bank. I collapsed onto the wet earth, gasping for air, my legs trembling so violently I couldn't stand. I was soaked, freezing and covered in filth, but I was alive. "Check the evidence," Grant ordered, crouching beside me. He was scanning the darkness, listening. I pulled the envelope and recorder out of my shirt. The envelope was damp at the corners, but the photos inside were plastic-coated surveillance prints. They were fine. The recorder was dry. "It's okay," I said, my voice shaking. "It's safe." "Good, because we just lost our ride." Grant gestured back toward the direction of the shack. They'll torch the truck, and they'll block the main roads out of the county. So we're stranded? Not exactly, Grant said. He stood up and walked a few paces down the riverbank, parting a curtain of willow branches. Nana wasn't just paranoid, she was prepared. Hidden behind the willows, pulled halfway up the bank and covered in a camouflage tarp, was a boat. It wasn't a sleek speedboat. It was a flat-bottomed aluminum skiff with a rusted outboard motor. She bought this the same year she bought the house, Grant said, yanking the tarp off. She told me to keep the engine serviced every 6 months. I thought she just liked fishing. She hated fishing, I said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. She was allergic to seafood. Grant pushed the boat into the water. Get in. I scrambled over the gunwale. Grant hopped in the back and lowered the motor. He didn't pull the start cord immediately. Instead, he used a long push pole to silently guide us out into the center of the river, letting the current take us downstream, away from the search party. Only when we were a mile downriver did he pull the cord. The engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life, a beautiful mechanical sound of freedom. We sped down the dark river, the wind whipping my wet clothes against my skin. I shivered, but for the first time in hours, my mind was clear. Where are we going? I shouted over the engine noise. We can't go to the police. The judge is compromised. The local cops are compromised. Who is left? Grant looked at me from the stern, his face grim in the moonlight. We need to go to the one place Patricia won't look, and the one place the judge can't reach. Where is that? Tallahassee, Grant said. The FBI field office is risky, but I have a contact there, an old buddy from the service. He's not on the payroll, but we can't just walk in the front door. We need to make copies of that tape. If we walk in there with the only copy and they confiscate it, we're dead. How do we do that at 2 a.m. in a boat? We don't, Grant said. We need to get to civilization. We need a computer. And we need dry clothes. He steered the boat toward a small, rickety dock appearing out of the gloom on the western bank. A single light bulb hung from a pole, illuminating a sign that read, Gators, Gas and Bait, closed. We're breaking in, I asked as he cut the engine and let us drift toward the pilings. We're borrowing resources, Grant corrected. He tied off the boat and climbed onto the dock, his boots thudding softly on the wood. He reached a hand down to help me up. I took his hand. His grip was warm, rough, and solid. As I stepped onto the dock, a shadow detached itself from the side of the bait shop. I gasped, freezing in place. An old man sat in a rocking chair on the porch of the shack, a shotgun resting casually across his lap. He chewed on a toothpick, staring at us with eyes that had seen too much. Closed means closed, the old man rasped. He racked the shotgun. Ch-ch. Grant didn't flinch. He slowly raised his hands, palms open. We don't want trouble, Pop, just gas and a phone. The old man squinted at Grant, then shifted his gaze to me, mud-caked, shivering, and clutching a waterproof bag to my chest. You two look like you crawled out of hell, the old man noted. We did, I said, finding my voice, and the devils are still chasing us. The old man held my gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered the shotgun. Devils, huh? He spat the toothpick onto the deck. Well, I never did like devils. Come on inside. Coffee's hot. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. We had found a sanctuary, however temporary, but as I walked past the old man, I glanced back at the river. The water was black and silent, but I knew the peace was an illusion. The hunt wasn't over. It was just moving to dry land. The inside of Gator's Gas and Bait smelled of stale cigarette smoke, cured meats, and the damp, fishy scent of the river. But to me, it smelled like salvation. The old man, who introduced himself simply as Pop, locked the heavy wooden door behind us and flipped the sign to closed. He didn't ask for our names, and he didn't ask who was chasing us. In this part of the Panhandle, questions were considered rude, but hospitality to strays was a code of honor. Bathrooms in the back, Pop grunted. pointing with a gnarled finger toward a dimly lit hallway. "There's a hose out back if you want to rinse the heavy muck off first. Don't clog my drains." Grant nodded his thanks, his hand resting protectively on the small of my back. "We appreciate it, Pop. We just need an hour. And a computer, if you have one." "Got a desktop in the office," Pop said, shuffling toward a coffee pot that looked like it had been brewing since the 90s. "It's slow as molasses and runs on Windows 95, but it connects to the web eventually." We went out back to the hose spigot first. The water was freezing, but scrubbing the layers of swamp slime off my skin felt like a baptism. I watched the black mud swirl down the drain, taking with it the physical residue of the chase, even if the fear remained tattooed on my bones. Grant washed his face and arms quickly, his eyes constantly scanning the dark tree line surrounding the shop. "We need to move fast," Grant said, handing me a rough towel he'd found on a hook. "The boat buys us time, but they'll figure out the river current eventually. We need to digitize that tape and those photos before we get to Tallahassee." "Why?" I asked, shivering as I dried my hair. "Can't we just hand the originals to your FBI friend?" "Never carry the only copy of your life insurance," Grant said grimly. "If we get pulled over, if we get intercepted, if my friend isn't as clean as I think he is, we need a fail-safe. We upload everything to a cloud server, scheduled to release to every news outlet in Florida if we don't log in to stop it every 24 hours. A dead man's switch, I realized. Exactly. We went back inside. Pop had poured 2 mugs of coffee that tasted like battery acid and burnt hazelnuts. I drank it gratefully. The caffeine hit my bloodstream like a kick to the chest, sharpening my senses. Pop led us into a cramped office behind the counter. It was piled high with invoices, fishing lures, and taxidermy projects in various stages of completion. On the desk sat a beige computer tower that hummed loudly. "All yours," Pop said. He reached for a remote control and clicked on a small television mounted in the corner. "I'm gonna watch the weather. See if this storm's gonna break." Grant sat at the computer, his fingers flying over the clunky keyboard as he navigated to a secure file hosting site. I plugged the voice recorder into the microphone jack using an auxiliary cord Grant found in a drawer. We began the agonizingly slow process of transferring the audio. While the progress bar crawled across the screen, the TV flickered to a local news channel. The breaking news banner was red and urgent. My breath caught in my throat. On the screen was a live shot of my Tampa bungalow, or what was left of it. The house was a smoldering ruin. Firefighters were spraying water on blackened beams, and standing in front of the yellow tape, wearing a flawless black dress and oversized sunglasses, was Patricia. She was crying. But it wasn't the hysterical screaming of the courtroom. This was a practiced, fragile weeping. She held a tissue to her nose, looking directly into the camera. "We're just devastated," Patricia sobbed, her voice trembling perfectly. "My daughter. Poor Jordan. She's been struggling with her mental health since my mother passed. She was so unstable, paranoiac. She thought people were after her." The reporter thrust a microphone closer. "Mrs. Banks, authorities are saying the gas line was tampered with from the inside. Do you believe your daughter caused this explosion?" Patricia looked down, then up, a single tear tracking through her makeup. "I don't want to believe it. But Jordan, she said she'd burn it all down before she let me help her. I just hope she's at peace now." I felt a scream building in my chest, hot and volcanic. She was burying me. She was painting me as a suicidal arsonist to cover up an assassination attempt. It was brilliant. It was evil. "She's good," Grant muttered, not looking away from the computer screen. "She's spinning the narrative, so if you turn up dead, it's a suicide. And if you turn up alive, you're a dangerous fugitive." "I'm going to kill her," I whispered. My hands were shaking, not from fear this time, but from a rage so pure it felt like clarity. She tried to kill me, and now she's using my death for clout. "Don't get mad," Grant said, hitting the upload button on the audio file. "Get even. We just saved the tape. Now the photos." Pop, who had been watching the TV in silence, turned his head slowly to look at me. He looked at the screen, where my driver's license photo was currently being displayed under the headline, "Presumed Dead," and then back at me. "You don't look crazy to me," Pop said, chewing on his toothpick. "You look pissed off." "My mother is the one lying," I said, my voice steady. "She's working with the people who blew up my house." Pop grunted. "Figured. That lady cries like a crocodile, no snot." "Excuse me?" "When people really cry, they're snot," Pop said sagely. "She's too dry, fake." He reached into his pocket and tossed a set of keys onto the desk. "My truck is out back. It's a '98 Chevy. Ugly as sin, but the engine is solid. Take it." I stared at the keys. "Pop, we can't. If they catch us, they'll trace it back to you." "Let 'em trace it," Pop shrugged. "I'm 78 years old and I got cancer in my liver. What are they going to do? Put me in jail? Free health care." He cracked a dry smile. "Besides, I hate bullies, and I hate suits. Go give 'em hell, girl." Grant finished the upload. He stood up, grabbed the keys, and looked at Pop with genuine respect. "You're a good man, Pop." "Get out of here before I change my mind." Pop waved us off. "And take some jerky. You look skinny." We grabbed a handful of venison jerky and ran out the back door. The truck was exactly as described, a rusted, dented beast of a vehicle with a fading bumper sticker that read, "I'd rather be fishing." Grant threw our gear into the cab. I climbed into the passenger seat, the leather cracking under my weight. "Tallahassee is 2 hours west," Grant said, turning the ignition. The engine roared to life with a throaty rumble. "We stick to the back roads until we hit the city limits. Then we blend in." "What about the roadblock?" I asked. "If Patricia has spun this story, the police are looking for a mentally unstable arsonist." "We're not going to run the roadblock," Grant said, his eyes hard as he shifted into gear. "We're going to become invisible, but first we need to make a phone call." He pulled out the burner phone as we peeled out of the gravel lot onto the dark highway. "Who are you calling?" "The judge," Grant said. My eyes widened. "Are you insane? He's the enemy." "He's a cornered animal," Grant corrected. "Patricia is on TV playing the grieving mother. The syndicate is blowing up houses. The judge is sitting in his mansion wondering if he's next on the hit list because he failed to keep the secret. I'm going to give him a choice." Grant dialed the number. He put it on speaker. It rang 4 times. Then a shaky voice answered. "Who is this?" "This is the handyman," Grant said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the stuff of nightmares. "And I'm sitting here with Jordan. And we're listening to a very interesting tape recording from November 3rd. Silence on the other end, then a jagged intake of breath. I did what she asked. I gave her the houses." "You didn't stop the fire, Richard," Grant said coldly, "and now the syndicate is cleaning house. How long do you think you have until they decide you're a loose end, until your car brakes fail or your gas line ruptures? What do you want?" The judge's voice was bordering on hysteria. "We're coming to Tallahassee," Grant said. "We're going to the FBI. If you want to live, you're going to meet us there. You're going to walk into that federal building and turn yourself in. You're going to confess to the plea deal, the bribery, and the money laundering. I can't. They'll kill me." "If you don't," Grant said, "I release the tape to the press in 2 hours. And then the syndicate kills you anyway, but you die a disgraced criminal. If you turn yourself in, you get witness protection. You get to live. It's your call, Your Honor." Grant hung up. He tossed the phone onto the dashboard. I stared at him. "Do you think he'll do it?" "I think he's a coward," Grant said, pressing the accelerator as the truck ate up the dark asphalt. "And cowards always choose the path of least resistance. Witness protection is better than a shallow grave." I looked out the window. The trees were blurring past, a tunnel of green and black. I thought about Nana. I thought about the fake will on the Denny's placemat. I thought about the lie that had kept me safe for 12 years and the truth that was about to set me free. "Grant," I said quietly. "Yeah?" When this is over, when we burn them down, what happens to us? Grant glanced at me. The dashboard lights cast shadows across his stubbled jaw. "Let's survive the night first, Jordan," he said softly. "Then we'll figure out the rest." We drove on into the darkness, two ghosts in a stolen truck carrying a bomb made of truth, heading straight for the heart of the capital. Tallahassee emerged from the pre-dawn fog like a city holding its breath. The state capital wasn't the tropical paradise of Miami or the sprawling chaos of Tampa. It was a town of marble buildings, ancient oak trees, and secrets whispered in back rooms. At 4 a.m., the streets were empty, slick with a fine mist that turned the streetlights into hazy halos of amber. Grant parked Pop's rusted Chevy truck 3 blocks away from the federal courthouse, tucking it into the shadows of a parking garage stairwell. He killed the engine, and the silence that followed felt heavy, charged with the kinetic energy of a storm about to break. "This is it," he said, checking the magazine of a handgun he'd pulled from the glove box. Pop's truck gun, a heavy .45 that looked like it had seen better days. He tucked it into the back of his waistband. "We walk from here. Keep your head down, hood up." I pulled the oversized hoodie I'd borrowed from Pop's closet over my head. It smelled of mothballs and old tobacco, a stark contrast to the sterile, terrifying scent of the courthouse, where this nightmare had begun just 24 hours ago. "Is your friend going to be there?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Miller is solid," Grant said, though his eyes were scanning the rooftops as we stepped onto the sidewalk. "He's the only guy in the bureau I trust not to be on a payroll. I texted him the code word. If he's there, he's alone. If he's not, we're walking into a kill box." We moved through the empty streets, avoiding the main boulevards. The majestic structure of the old Capitol loomed ahead, its white columns ghostly in the fog. Behind it stood the brutalist tower of the new Capitol, and adjacent to it, the Federal Building. The meeting point was Kleeman Plaza, an open park space nestled between the government buildings. It was open enough to prevent a close-range ambush, but cluttered enough with statues and fountains to offer cover. As we neared the central fountain, I saw a lone figure sitting on a bench. He was wearing a gray trench coat, drinking from a styrofoam cup. He looked like any other overworked civil servant, except for the way his posture remained rigid, alert. Grant stopped 10 feet away. "Miller." The man turned. He had a face carved from granite, tired eyes, and a scar running through his left eyebrow. He looked at Grant, then at me. His gaze lingered on my face, the face currently plastered on every news station in Florida under the headline, "Deceased." "You look good for a corpse, Ms. Banks," Miller said dryly. He didn't stand up. "You've caused quite a stir. The Tampa field office is calling it a tragic accident, suicide by gas leak." "It was a hit," Grant said, stepping into the light. "Syndicate. They tried to scrub the site." "I figured," Miller said. He took a sip of his coffee. "Especially when I got a call from a very panicked federal judge about 20 minutes ago. He says he wants to surrender into protective custody. Says he has information about a 12-year-old wire fraud ring involving the Gulf Coast Syndicate." "He called you?" I asked, surprised. "He called the switchboard," Miller corrected. "I intercepted it. Grant said you had leverage. I didn't realize your leverage was Judge Richard Sterling." "Is he coming?" Grant asked. "He's en route." Miller checked his watch. "ETA 2 minutes. He sounded like a man who knows the Reaper is following him." I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the morning chill. The syndicate will follow him. "That's the plan," Grant said grimly. "We can't fight them in the shadows, Jordan. We have to bring them into the light. If they try to hit a federal judge in front of the FBI headquarters, there's no sweeping that under the rug. That's an act of war." Headlights swept across the plaza. A sleek black Mercedes sedan screeched to a halt at the curb, tires hopping the concrete. The door flew open, and Judge Sterling stumbled out. He looked nothing like the arrogant man who had smiled at me from the bench. His expensive suit was rumpled, his tie missing, his silver hair wild. He was clutching a briefcase to his chest like a life preserver. "Help me!" he screamed, sprinting toward us, his dress shoes slipping on the wet pavement. "They're right behind me! I saw them!" Miller stood up, his hand moving instantly to the holster inside his jacket. "Calm down, Richard. Hands where I can see them." "You don't understand!" Sterling gasped, reaching us and collapsing onto the nearest bench, wheezing. "Patricia, she told them I was the leak." I froze. "Patricia?" "She followed me," Sterling sobbed. "She called me tonight. She demanded money. When I told her I was going to the feds, she laughed. She said if she couldn't have the money, nobody would." "Where is she, Richard?" Grant demanded, grabbing the judge by the lapels. "She's—" Before he could finish, a second car roared into the plaza. It wasn't a black SUV this time. It was a bright red convertible, and my mother's dream car, the one she'd leased the day after Nana's funeral. It skidded to a stop right behind the judge's Mercedes. Patricia stepped out. She looked immaculate even at 4:30 a.m. She was wearing the black funeral dress from the TV interview, her hair perfectly coiffed. She held a phone in one hand and a small silver pistol in the other. "Mother," I breathed, stepping out from behind Grant. Patricia stopped. She dropped the phone. Her mouth fell open, the mask of the grieving mother shattering instantly into something raw and horrified. "Jordan?" she whispered. Then her eyes narrowed, filling with a familiar, toxic hatred. "You little cockroach! I saw the house blow up. How are you not dead?" "I'm hard to kill," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Unlike your conscience." "Put the gun down, Patricia!" Miller shouted, drawing his weapon. "Federal agent, drop it!" Patricia ignored him. She looked wild, cornered. She pointed the gun not at me, but at the judge. "You promised me," she shrieked at Sterling. "You promised me the inheritance. You said if I kept my mouth shut about the plea deal, I'd get the money when the old hag died. You tricked me." "I had to," Sterling whimpered. "Eleanor had tapes. She was going to ruin us all." "So you gave my money to her?" Patricia spat, gesturing at me with the gun. "To this ungrateful little brat who thinks she's better than me? I deserve that money. I earned it. I laundered it." "You admitted it," Miller said, his voice calm. "Mrs. Banks, you just confessed to a federal crime in front of an agent. Put the gun down." Patricia laughed, a jagged, broken sound. "It doesn't matter. The syndicate knows. I called them. I told them where you were, Richard. I told them I'd deliver you myself if they let me keep the Orlando house." "You sold us out?" Sterling turned pale. "Patricia, you idiot. They don't make deals with liabilities." As if on cue, the hum of a heavy engine echoed off the surrounding buildings. A dark van turned the corner slowly, killing its lights as it approached the plaza. The side door slid open. "Get down!" Grant roared. He tackled me to the pavement just as the air erupted. Thwip, thwip, thwip. Silenced automatic fire tore through the morning silence. Bullets sparked off the pavement and shattered the windshield of the judge's Mercedes. I screamed, covering my head as concrete chips rained down on me. Miller was returning fire, his service weapon booming loudly, a distinct crack, crack, crack against the hushed thwips of the attackers. "Stay down!" Grant yelled, firing Pop's .45 toward the van. I looked up through the chaos. Judge Sterling was scrambling backward, trying to hide behind the fountain, but Patricia stood frozen. She looked at the van, her supposed partners, confusion etched on her face. She raised her hand, waving at them. "Wait!" she screamed. "I'm here! I brought him to you! It's me, Patricia!" The gunner in the van didn't hesitate. He swung the barrel toward the woman in the black dress. "Mom, move!" I screamed, reaching out instinctively. Patricia looked at me. For a split second, I saw something in her eyes. Not love, not regret, but a sudden, terrifying realization that she was not the main character in this story. She was just a loose end. 3 shots hit her in the chest. The red dress bloomed darker. Patricia Banks crumpled to the ground, her designer sunglasses skittering across the concrete. "Suppressing fire!" Miller yelled into his radio. "Officer down! Shots fired at Kleeman Plaza! I need backup now!" Sirens began to wail in the distance, a rising chorus of blue lights. The van, realizing the trap had sprung too loud and too fast, screeched its tires. The door slammed shut and it sped off toward the highway on-ramp. Grant scrambled up, pulling me with him. "Are you hit?" "No," I gasped, my ears ringing. "Patricia, is she—" We ran over to where my mother lay. She was staring up at the cloudy sky, her breathing wet and ragged. The blood was spreading fast, pooling around her like a dark halo. I knelt beside her. I didn't want to touch her, but I couldn't look away. She turned her head, her eyes focusing on me. They were dimming, losing that sharp, malicious spark. She tried to speak, blood bubbling at the corner of her lips. "The Orlando house," she wheezed. "It has a pool." And then she was gone. Even in death, she was thinking about the real estate. "Secure the judge," Miller barked, moving toward Sterling, who was curled in a fetal ball behind a statue of a dolphin. "Jordan, Grant, stay put. The area is a crime scene." I stood up, shaking. Grant came up behind me. Wrapping his arms around my shoulders, I leaned into him, staring at the body of the woman who had given me life and then tried to steal it. "It's over," Grant whispered into my hair. "She can't hurt you anymore." "She didn't win," I said, my voice hollow. "She didn't get the win she wanted." "No," Grant said, "but neither did the syndicate. Look." He pointed toward the federal building. Dozens of agents were pouring out, putting on tactical vests. The attack on a public plaza had triggered a massive response. The syndicate had overplayed their hand. They had tried to clean up a mess and instead started a war they couldn't hide from. Miller dragged the handcuffed Judge Sterling over to us. The judge was weeping, broken. "I have the drive," Grant said, handing the USB stick to Miller. "The recording, the ledger, the photos, it's all there. And you have the bagman right here." Miller took the drive. He looked at Patricia's body, then at Sterling. "This takes down the whole network. Judges, cops, the money men. This cleans out the rot." He looked at me. "You're going to need to testify, Jordan, but until then, you're technically dead. It might be safer to stay that way for a few days." I looked at the sunrise beginning to burn through the fog, illuminating the blood on the pavement. "I'm done being dead," I said, wiping a smudge of mud from my cheek. "I want my life back, and I want my houses." They buried Patricia on a Tuesday, under a sky so blue it felt like an insult. The turnout was sparse. A few distant cousins who were sniffing around for a handout, her hairstylist, and me. There were no tears from the pews, only the polite, uncomfortable shuffling of people who knew the woman in the casket was the villain of her own story. I stood at the gravesite, wearing a simple black dress, not linen, and definitely not charged to anyone else's credit card. I looked at the headstone I had paid for. It was modest. Patricia Banks, 1972-2025. Rest in peace. I didn't add beloved mother. I couldn't bring myself to lie to the stone, and I think Nana would have haunted me if I had. "You okay?" I felt a warm hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Grant standing there, looking uncomfortable in a suit jacket that was tight across his broad shoulders. The stubble was gone, replaced by a clean shave that showed off a strong, honest jawline, but his blue eyes were just as sharp as they had been in the swamp. "I'm okay," I said, and for the first time in 6 months, I actually meant it. "I'm just closing the book." "It was a hell of a book," Grant muttered, glancing at the fresh dirt. "Glad the sequel is going to be boring." "Boring sounds perfect," I smiled, slipping my hand into his. It had been 6 months since the shootout at Kleeman Plaza. The aftermath had been swift and brutal, but in the way a forest fire is brutal, it burned away the rot to let something new grow. Agent Miller had been true to his word. With the evidence from Nana's ledger and the tape recording, the FBI dismantled the Gulf Coast syndicate with surgical precision. It was the lead story for weeks. Indictments dropped like hammers. Police captains, city councilmen, and bankers were dragged out of their offices in handcuffs. Judge Sterling didn't get the witness protection deal he wanted. Because he had actively participated in the conspiracy to conceal evidence, Miller's superiors offered him a plea, 20 years in federal prison in exchange for full testimony, or face a life sentence for accessory to attempted murder. Sterling took the 20 years. Last I heard, he was working in the prison library, organizing books and aging rapidly. As for me, I became the girl who came back from the dead. The media cycle was exhausting. I was a victim, then a hero, then a celebrity. I declined the book deals. I declined the talk shows. I just wanted my life back. I sold the Orlando condo. I couldn't step foot in it without hearing Patricia's voice complaining about the grout. The money from the sale paid off my student loans in one fell swoop, with enough left over to start a college fund for kids I didn't have yet, but might someday. We drove back to Tampa in silence, the radio playing softly. We pulled into the driveway of the bungalow. It wasn't the same house. The explosion had gutted the original structure, leaving only the foundation. But I hadn't sold the lot. I couldn't let Patricia take this place from me, even with fire. So, I rebuilt. The new house was different. It was painted a soft sage green with a metal roof that could withstand a hurricane. It had a security system that rivaled Fort Knox, installed personally by Grant, who had officially retired from the handyman business to open his own security consulting firm. We walked inside. The air smelled of fresh paint and cedar, not old memories and dust. "I got the mail," Grant said, tossing a stack of envelopes onto the quartz island in the kitchen. I sifted through them. Junk mail, a utility bill, and a thick, cream-colored envelope with no return address. My heart did a familiar stutter step. "What is this?" Grant froze, his hand instinctively moving to his waistband, though he wasn't carrying a weapon inside the house anymore. "Open it carefully." I slit the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a key. The paper was old. The ink was fading. It was Nana's handwriting. "My dearest Jordan, if you are reading this, then the storm is over. You survived. I knew you would. You have my stubbornness and your father's heart. I know I left you a mess. I know I left you with danger. For that, I am eternally sorry. But I had to know you were strong enough to hold the weight of our family's truth before I could give you the rest. The Panhandle house wasn't just a hiding spot for the ledger. It sits on 40 acres of protected wetlands, but the 5 acres closest to the road, I had them rezoned commercially back in '98 before the laws changed. It's not swampland, sweetie. It's a gold mine. I had a developer draft plans for an eco-resort years ago. I never pursued it because I didn't want the attention. But now, the attention is yours to command. Build something beautiful. Build something that lasts. And for heaven's sake, don't let Patricia pick the drapes. Love, Nana. I stared at the letter, tears blurring my vision. Even from the grave, she was still dropping bombshells. She hadn't just left me a house. She'd left me an empire, wrapped in mud and disguised as a shack. I held up the key. It was a small silver key with a tag that read, "Safety Deposit Box 404. "What's in the box?" Grant asked, leaning over my shoulder to read the letter. "Knowing Nana?" I laughed, wiping a tear from my cheek. "Probably the deed to the resort, or maybe just a really good recipe for key lime pie." Grant chuckled, wrapping his arms around my waist and pulling me back against his chest. I leaned into him, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart. "You know," he said softly, kissing the top of my head, "we could go up there this weekend. Check out the land. See if it's really suitable for a resort." "Is that a professional security opinion?" I asked, turning in his arms to face him. "Strictly professional," he grinned. Although I might need to inspect the fishing conditions on the river, for safety. I smiled, rising on my tiptoes to kiss him. It was a slow, deep kiss that tasted of coffee and promise. When we pulled apart, the Florida sun was setting through the kitchen window, casting long, golden shadows across the floor. I thought about the judge's smirk in the courtroom, the way he had dismissed my life as ridiculous. He was wrong. My life wasn't ridiculous. It was messy and dangerous and complicated, but it was mine. "Let's go," I said, "but we're taking the truck. I'm done with sedans." Grant laughed. "Deal." I looked out the window at the backyard. The mango tree had survived the fire, its branches heavy with new fruit. The roots went deep, holding fast through the storms, drinking from the soil, enduring the heat. I walked over to the sliding glass door and locked it. Not because I was afraid. The bad guys were gone. The monsters were buried. But because I had things worth protecting now. As I turned off the kitchen light, leaving the house in the soft glow of dusk, I thought I heard a faint, familiar sound, the snap-crack of gum popping. I paused, listening, but it was just the house settling, just the wind in the palms. Patricia was gone. Her noise was silenced. I walked down the hallway toward the future, toward Grant, toward the life Nana had fought to give me. The truth had set me free, just like the verse said. But the lie? The lie was buried 6 feet deep, and I intended to keep it there. Did your blood boil watching Patricia try to destroy her own daughter? Did your heart race when the truth finally came out of that swamp? Here is the cold, hard reality. We all know a Patricia. Maybe she's your mother. Maybe she's your boss. Maybe she's the friend smiling in your face while holding a knife behind your back. They bank on your silence. They bank on you being too afraid to fight back. But on this channel, we don't stay silent. We expose them. We tell the stories the toxic people pray you never hear. We serve the karma hot, and we don't apologize for it. So ask yourself, whose side are you on? If you are sick of the gaslighting, if you are tired of the manipulation, and if you want to see justice served every single time, then you need to smash that subscribe button right now. Don't just watch the revenge. Be part of the movement. Join the family that fights back. Subscribe now or stay in the dark. I'll see you in the next story.